iLeasePro is a full-service, end-to-end lease accounting and management solution specifically designed for lessees, those companies, those entities that lease space, and that is real estate, both real estate and equipment. John? We want to give you a little history of the project and how we got to where we are now. And this is, as that slide will demonstrate, this is a long-term issue that has been out there for a while. Back over 14 years ago, the Securities and Exchange Commission targeted off-balance sheet financing as some issue that needed to be resolved and more transparency in the accounting. And one of those off-balance sheet financing that they identified was operating leases that do not, a lease obligation that does not have to be recognized on the balance sheet of the lessee. They gave that issue over to the Financial Accounting Standards Board, and also the International Accounting Standards Board participated. And as you can see, over a 10-year period, those two accounting bodies deliberated and issued a number of documents that were commented upon and modified. But finally, in 2016, they came out with final standards, which dramatically changed the way leases, particularly operating leases, are accounted for on the balance sheet. Next slide, John. So what are the changes? You know, under current GAAP, or I guess now we could say old GAAP, only narrowly defined lease obligations were recognized on the balance sheet of the lessee, and they were capital leases. And that meant, you know, you had to lease say, real estate for over a long period of time for a significant amount of the economic life of the asset. Under the new standard, 842, a lessee is required to recognize a lease liability and a right of use asset for virtually all lease obligations. The only exceptions are narrowly defined short-term leases, 12 months or less. So that has presented a major challenge for a number of companies. And the lease liability, as indicated on the slide, is based upon the present value of the lease payments over the lease term. Next, John. So what's included here? Well, the key phrases to look at on this slide is any agreement that conveys the right to control property, plant, or equipment in exchange for consideration. So any real estate agreement, retail shops, equipment, aircraft, they're all under this umbrella, this new umbrella that has to be accounted for differently. And the companies that will be impacted, it's hard to identify any particular industry. Certainly retail shops, if you have an extensive string of retail shops, that would be incorporated into this. But any company that uses leases as a significant financing component, be it real estate, equipment leases, any company like that will be incorporated into this, and we'll have this issue to deal with. Next, John. So, impact on the financial calculations, and here are some financial ratios that could be significantly impacted by this, because you're going to be recognizing the additional assets, the right of use asset, and additional liabilities, the lease liability on your balance sheet. So that means that obviously assets will increase, the lease liability is a component of debt, so the debt will increase, net worth could be impacted, leverage ratios could be impacted. So there, from a financial ratio standpoint, there could be significant impacts. And another important component to consider are disclosures. Under what I'll call old GAAP, the disclosures were relatively straightforward and not very complicated. Under the new standard, the disclosures are significantly expanded, much more robust, both in the qualitative and the quantitative disclosures. So entities really have to focus in on those disclosures and how are they going to gather the information that will be necessary to make those disclosures. So financial impacts, and here's some benchmarks that we took from some studies that have been done by some of the major accounting firms. And, you can see that the lease obligations that are estimated to come onto the balance sheet, close to $3 billion. As we talked about before, debt-to-equity ratios, debt covenants could be impacted. So conversations with the banks where you have your debt obligations are necessary. We've talked about financial disclosures expanding, but costs of implementation could really be significant as a result of these changes. And the operational impacts really cannot be ignored. The new standard applies to all existing leases upon adoption. So that means that there's no grandfathering of existing leases. They all have to be dealt with. Complexity of calculations will increase. They have to consider any option periods and how that might impact the lease term that you might have to present value the payments over. You could have data coming in from various sources within the organization that need to be brought together so that you make sure that all the leases are captured. Certainly more estimates and judgments than coming to the present value calculations. And then within the standard, there's an ongoing requirement to periodically review and possibly reassess estimates based upon changed circumstances. So all of those things have to be brought into play. Now, effective dates. For public companies, publicly held business entities, the adoption date was actually 1/1/2019. So virtually all, I guess, of the public companies will have dealt with this. But what our product really is focused in on are mid-sized private companies. And those companies have to adopt for fiscal periods beginning after 1/1/2020. And what we're finding is that many of those privately held, non-public, mid-sized companies really haven't dealt with this issue and now are just coming to the assessment that they have to do something. They have to look at aggregating the data. They have to look at what they have for system support. And many of them now are reaching out to us and to others to look at systems that can handle the accounting complexities. Next. So here's some statistics that we got from another survey that we looked at, and as you can see, significant percentage of private companies haven't started the project yet. Significantly more complex for a number of companies. And the key, I think, component here is that 80% of private companies have not yet selected a software vendor. So we think over the next 7 or 8 months and probably into 2020, there'll be a lot of activity in this area and a lot of businesses and companies that will be looking for a software solution to handle this issue. And as Megan indicated, we have integrated with Intacct, and what we're showing here is a kind of a schematic of how this will work. iLeasePro will handle all of the lease accounting calculations and will send entries up to Sage Intacct. And what we're adopting with some feedback from Sage Intacct development team is sending those entries into a clearing account, which will go into Sage Intacct. All of the accounts payable, all of the payments that will be necessary to the lessors will be coming out of Sage Intacct. But we'll be supporting Sage Intacct with all of the accounting entries that are necessary. And on the right side of this slide, just for reference purposes, we also, within our iLeasePro, can handle subleases. So therefore, there can be, if you do have a sublease, we can handle that through an accounts receivable entry that goes up into Sage Intacct. John?
Thank you, Sean. So what I'll do is get into a little demo here, but before I do that, I just wanted to let you know that the integration between iLeasePro and Intacct is taking advantage of their web services integration. It's multi-entity capable and also includes dimensions. There is no customization required. The only thing required are a couple setup pieces to enable the web services if that's not available, and also setting up some new general ledger accounts that are required for the 842. Give me a second.
And before you go to the demo, can I ask some questions that have come up?
Sure.
Okay, or as you're moving to it. One is on the slide, it said that there'd be $1 trillion moving to the balance sheet. But you said billion. Is it actually in the trillion? So it was $3 trillion, I think it said on the slide.
Oh, that was my mistake.
Yeah.
It is $3 trillion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Just want to keep everybody. I can't.
I guess
keep
I couldn't
trillion
get
in my brain, so that's why I was like, really, three? It's a lot. Okay. If a company was not going to use software, is there really any way to handle the reporting that they need with the new guidelines manually?
Well, we were looking at, if you have, let's say, 20 or 25 leases that are relatively straightforward, I believe one could handle that through Excel spreadsheets and some calculations and compile the information. But what we believe and what we've seen through the conversations we've had with various companies is once you get beyond, let's say, 20 to 25 leases, that process using, let's say, Excel can get very cumbersome. So most companies with more than those 20 or 25 leases are looking for some other kind of solution to handle the complexity.
Okay. And then you mentioned that all active leases fall under this new guideline. So is there any complexity to bringing in the history for that? Or is it pretty straightforward that it's just the cutoff of the lease from this point forward?
No, you load in information from your implementation date forward for existing leases.
Okay. All right. And another question came up. Is the cost of implementation something that can be capitalized for the company that chooses to adopt iLeasePro and Intacct?
Well, I can give you some informal accounting advice, and I would say no.
Okay. All right. Very good. It can be for contracts, so that's why it came up, I think. Okay. Thank you. Those are the questions so far.
Okay, great. So what I'll do is I'll go through a very high-level demo, but more specific focus on the integration between iLeasePro and Intacct. iLeasePro is a cloud-based application. It's highly secure, sits on Amazon Web Services, and the subscription for iLeasePro is based on a monthly basis. Oops, sorry. My wife. Based on a monthly subscription, and that subscription includes access to all the features within the product for unlimited number of users within the account. Every user would get an email, use their email to log in and a password. So we're just going to log in right now. What you'll see is the portfolio landing page. We have a very powerful portfolio feature that allows the users to organize the leases by any type of group that they'd like. You can see an example of vehicles, operating leases, finance leases. It's totally customizable to however they want to manage their leases. Over on the left are account level links. We have an executive dashboard. It's a full document management system, portfolio level accounting. We have about 45 reports out of the box. Each report has a filter to extend it to probably about 100 different reports. It's a full contact management system, so it allows you to enter in a name once and apply that name across multiple leases, across multiple roles. And then we have a transition feature that allows you to enter in the initial transition information and lock in that adoption to begin moving forward. So what I'll do is I'll just take a quick run through of one of the leases and show you that this is a full end-to-end lease lifecycle tool. Can capture all of the information in a lease. This is general lease information. Happens to be a real estate lease, so you can capture the operating expenses for CAM as well as real estate taxes, and also document management. Upload any documents right into the application. The unit feature allows you to capture the property information and the unit information. You can have multiple units within one lease. This is where you would calculate the rent. Very simply, put in the base rent and put any number of steps in if that's appropriate. You can increase the steps by flat amount, incremental amount, or percentage increase. You can capture both lessor and lessee insurance information. Enter in as many clauses as options as you like. Out of the box, we have the industry standards for clause labels as well as option labels, but these can be totally customizable by the user. We do have the ability also to create critical date notifications. You can select the date, set it as a critical date, and tell when to notify, and this will allow you to send emails to each user depending on whether they opt in or opt out. But you can also monitor this on the dashboard, the main dashboard that we have. We offer the ability to define dimensions across all the different GLs for any of the dimensions that are downloaded from Intacct. So the user the administrator can go in, once attached to Intacct, click on a button, and what it will do, it'll download all of the dimensions that are currently defined, and then you can apply them across leases. And then getting into the accounting. So these are the changes made specifically for the ASC 842. There are several new fields that need to be captured in order to create a correct amortization table. We have a lease classification wizard that allows the user to go through and, based on FASB guidance, they put in the critical information and we'll give them a recommended classification, whether it's operating or finance. They can either use that classification or they can override it to whatever they like. And as Sean mentioned earlier, you can segregate the information by selecting short-term lease method, which will not be calculated within the lease accounting standards. We'll take a look here. So I'm going to go in and create a journal entry for this month and upload it directly into Intacct. So we click this, it gives you a little message, says upload successful. I already logged into my Intacct account. I go into journal entries, field journals, and we set up a iLeasePro journal that you can view. And here you can see the journal entry just went up and is populated in Intacct. So the user will be responsible for promoting that journal entry into the general ledger. There are other lease accounting requirements that we have here, but I didn't want to get into that at this point. Anybody interested in a demo, happy to do that for you. So let's go back to the presentation. Sean, you want to take this?
So
Yes.
since you brought up demo, one of the questions that came in is whether or not it's possible to get a working demo of your software for our partners to show to prospects.
Yes. Let me log out. So anybody can go in and get a 30-day free trial by clicking on the demo, entering in the information, and they get instant access into the application.
Okay, very
We
good.
can, reach out to us, and we can help you through that with the instructions and certainly any guidance that you'd like.
Okay, pricing. As John indicated, the pricing that we provide includes access to all of the features. Once again, unlimited users, and we base our pricing strictly on the number of leases that are managed on the system. This is not a heavy infrastructure or hardware requirement tool. I think it's relatively straightforward and relatively simple to set up, and there are no annual maintenance fees. And we've tiered our pricing in components. So we have a price for up to 50 leases, which shown here is $375 per month. We've got a component for 50 to 100, 100 to 200, and so far up the line. And we'd be happy to discuss with any of the folks on the call pricing. And we also have a reseller program, and we provide, as indicated here, 35% based on cash collections of subscription fees in year one, 25% in years 2 through 4, and then if the partner, the value-added reseller, is providing ongoing support, we will talk to that individual or entity about being compensated for that support. And that brings us to the end of our presentation.
Okay. Someone just asked if you could repeat the pricing. They missed what you said. I think you said it was $370.
The initial pricing the initial pricing for up to 50 leases is $375 per month, and then we go up from there in increments. And we'd be happy to share that with anyone if they want more information.
Okay. One of the questions that's come in is, can you maintain insurance per tenant with notification of upcoming expirations within the software?
John, you want to take that?
Yeah. Could you say it again?
Can you maintain insurance per tenant with notification of upcoming expirations?
If a tenant is per lease, yes, but we do not have the ability to create a rent roll of tenants. And this is, as Sean mentioned earlier, iLeasePro is specific to lessees, not lessors. So a lessor would keep a rent roll, and if that's what they're looking for. This is more from a lessee perspective. So if they have multiple leases and each tenant is individual on a lease, yes, we can keep that. We can track insurance, and we can also create critical date notifications for any contract for that lease.
Okay. And then 2 people have asked, is this specifically for commercial, or can it also be used for residential leases?
Well, residential leases, I think we're getting mixed up again between lessor and lessee. I think for residential leases, I think that would be a lessor issue, and we don't have the ability to handle lessor accounting. Certainly for all commercial property and equipment that is being leased by a lessee, we can handle that.
Okay. And someone's asking what's the best way to investigate to becoming a reseller, and I wanted to explore that a little bit. Obviously, the marketplace partner, Sage Intacct Marketplace Partner website. If you go there and click on iLeasePro or put in iLeasePro into your search, you'll come up with information about the software and then a contact that will, I imagine, go to Sean and John and their staff. Is that correct? Oh, and here they have direct information. So, yeah. So that if you want to contact them directly, that's the way to do it. I do know that iLeasePro and Sean and John came to our attention in partner enablement because they have helped to close a few sales over the last few months, where this was, the key to the sale. And so they've been able to get in there, demonstrate the solution, show how smoothly it works with Sage Intacct, and then help the sale to close. One question that just came in was residential lessee might be relevant for a high net worth family office accounting. So in that situation, do you see your software being used there?
Well, in any, I guess I would answer that by saying in any lessee situation, I can see where we could be helpful. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And you guys have the expertise to talk to and would be honest if you can't do it, I'm sure.
Yes.
Another question is, what are the services for implementation? I'm assuming they're thinking how many hours. And do you actually do that, or would the partner be doing the implementation of iLeasePro?
We could, it could be either way. We provide the software, and that's really what we're focused on, but understand that folks will need help. So we offer importing services, project management services, and training as well, if a partner is interested in that. But if the partner was interested in taking part in the reseller program, what we would do is we would work with them so that they gain the expertise to be able to do it themselves, kind of train-the-trainer approach. But we certainly could provide implementation services and importing services if needed.
Okay. And this one, I'm really hoping you know how to answer because it's still a little bit Greek to me. Can your system calculate the two methods of ASC 842 adoption? And they're saying the effective date of adoption versus comparative financial statement method. Does your system calculate the weighted average rate and weighted average lease term as required in the new disclosures? Is that making sense to you?
The answer is yes.
Okay. Well, that was easy. It was harder for me to read than for you to answer. So I think those are the questions at this point. If anybody has other questions, feel free to put them into the chat.